Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to our second panel on education, the role of the government in fast-forwarding the changes for future education. Our previous panel was an insightful and encouraging discussion on reimagined learning in the post-COVID world. However, when considering this revamp, it is important to consider the role of our government in introducing these changes. The future of education is precarious to say the least. While many join hands in the hope that they will have the chance to venture into classrooms again, others are spending their time getting used to seeing their teachers through a laptop screen. As the future of education lies in uncertainty, we look to the government to necessitate education and reform. The call for reinvented learning models, revised curriculums, and retrained educators is necessary to adapt to a new reality. So join us today as we explore the future of education and the role that the government will play in forwarding these changes. To moderate this discussion, we have with us Mr. Amit Kaushik, CEO of the Australian Council for Educational Research in India. Mr. Kaushik joined the Indian Railways as a civil servant in 1987 and spent 20 years undertaking challenging assignments both in the railways and outside. Since 2007, he has worked with a number of education sector organizations, including Pratham, which is India's largest primary education NGO. Mr. Kaushik, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Our first panelist for this summit is Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, IAS, Principal Secretary to the Department of Industries for the Government of Telangana. His role involves developing policy frameworks, attracting new investments, identifying opportunities for utilizing IT in various government processes, and promoting digital empowerment. His last assignment was in the industrial promotion sector as Commissioner and MD of the Industries Department. Mr. Ranjan, thank you for being here with us today. Our second panelist for the session is Dr. Biswajit Saha, Director for Skill Education and Training for the Central Board of Secondary Education. Dr. Saha has done his BTech from Northeastern Regional Institute of Science of Technology, ME, and Department of ETCE, Jadavpur University, and PhD from the School of Science and Technology. Currently, he is the Director of the Central Board of Secondary Education. Dr. Saha, pleasure to have you with us today. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Ramnath Subramaniam, CEO of the Village Social Transformation Foundation. Dr. Subramaniam has held leadership positions across the financial services sector, with his last assignment being a fund manager at Goldman Sachs. Under his leadership, VSTF has been able to rope in large corporates to participate and contribute in this transformation project. Dr. Subramaniam, it's a delight to have you with us. Our final panelist for this session is Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, CEO of the Pratham Education Foundation. An economist by training, Ms. Banerjee joined Pratham in 1996. She has extensive field experience working directly with rural and urban communities, as well as in designing and implementing large-scale partnerships with governments for educational outcomes of primary school children. Ms. Banerjee, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Before we begin, I would like to acquaint you with a certain set of instructions. Since we are using a virtual platform, you may likely experience a time lag. The session recording will be shared after the summit, and the recording will be available for the duration of a month. In case you have any queries, please place them in the Q&A function and address it to everyone. Also, each session is on a separate Zoom link, so please head to the auditorium section on the summit landing page and click to join your session. I would like to remind our panelists that the session will end at 11:40 a.m. There will be a buzzer 5 minutes before the session ends as a reminder. Mr. Kaushik, over to you now.
Thank you, Yamini. It's a pleasure to be here. And good day to all of you who are my fellow panelists and attending from a cold and very cloudy Melbourne. I think this is an extremely interesting subject for a panel discussion. And I hope that we will get into some of the more trickier aspects of how government handles change and is responsible for change, given that we have people who are from the education sector as well as those who are not from the education sector. Before I invite the first panelist to share his views, I'd like to say a few things exercising my privilege as moderator. I spent about 20 years working with government in different capacities. And since 2007, I've worked with a number of organizations outside of government. And in all that time, I think the experience has reinforced my own view, a view that I always held even when I was in government, that the only agency with scale can be government. No matter how big a private sector organization or an NGO grows, it can never hope to replicate the scale that even the smallest state government can have. And so the real success of any initiative will eventually lie in its ability to partner with government. It is just not possible for any private entity to set up a parallel organization which can be anywhere as large as government. One of the best examples that I often give is that of Pratham, and I'm delighted that Rukmini is here today. Pratham is India's and possibly the world's largest primary school education NGO. And they work, what is it, Rukmini, now in 20, how many states? 22, 23? Or 22, 23 states across the country. But from
some
day one...
some states are not states anymore, so it's difficult to count.
Fair enough. But the point is that Pratham has, from its very inception, always planned to partner with government, because they understood very early on that it would not be possible for them to recreate entire systems or ecosystems of education in a manner that government can. The problem is that government is also very difficult to work with sometimes. There are many reasons for this. Sometimes it is too slow, sometimes there is corruption, sometimes there's a tendency to centralize things, and very often it becomes a challenge to work in partnership with government unless you have a partner who understands what you are trying to do and supports it. So the question really is, how do we make government the lever that drives change, especially in these times? What are some of the changes that we foresee in school education as a result of our current situation, the whole coronavirus and COVID-19? And what are some of the measures that we would expect government to be able to introduce? Many people have talked about technology, but technology is not necessarily the answer to all the problems in the education space, because not everyone has access to the kind of technology that is being discussed. We talk about screen time, we talk about internet, but the fact is that the number of kids who have access to the internet or to devices is a very small proportion of the total number of children. So I hope that in our discussion today, we'll have the panel address some of these questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing from each one of you. Let me start by inviting our first panelist, Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, who's Principal Secretary, Department of Industries, Government of Telangana. What I propose is that each one of the speakers makes some opening remarks for perhaps about 5 to 7 minutes each. And then we'll pick up on some of the themes that you bring out. And I hope we'll have a discussion before we throw it open for Q&A to everybody else. Is that acceptable? Yeah? All right. Over to you, Mr. Ranjan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amit, and morning, fellow panelists. Amit, I would like to get your permission on something. See, typically you will find in every class, in every exam, some students who will go with a prepared answer. So whatever question you ask, they will give only that answer. So I want to play that role today. And seeing that Dr. Rukmini and Dr. Biswajit, such domain experts on school education, are in the panel, I would like to speak about higher education. And perhaps the organizers did not brief you properly. I mean, I may be the principal secretary, etc., but I'm also the officiating vice chancellor of a university for the last 1 year. It is the largest state-run technology university in Hyderabad. It's called the JNTU. And
that's interesting, because this was not mentioned in their introduction. I'm glad that you brought it up.
So that's the perspective I bring, having understood higher education and the university education very thoroughly. So even though you want to steer the discussion on school education, I like to contribute something on higher education. And I'm very sure that some of the points which I eventually end up making will be of relevance to school education as well. So do permit me this small diversion.
Please, by all means.
So, yeah, so my position is like this, that if you look at higher education, and as I said, since I'm looking at technology university, so let us look at technical education more specifically. Now, if you try to go deeper into what the goals of higher education are, or what are the expected outcomes of higher education, broadly we can identify three such goals or outcomes.
Yes, yes. You're doing that one. It still does not happen. Let me. Yes.
Sure. So, shall I continue?
Please.
Yeah. So, as I said, so if you look at it, there are three broad outcomes. One is, of course, when you are at a higher education level, then obviously you are getting deeper into a particular subject or a group of subjects. So definitely you develop deeper knowledge, deeper understanding, also a broader understanding about subject. You may be studying engineering, you may be studying humanity. So that is one outcome, that whoever participates in the higher education process ends up coming out with a deeper and a broader knowledge. The second is that when at the age group when you are pursuing higher education, you are also ready to join the workforce. You may join formal sector employment, you may become an entrepreneur. And as we know, the workforce or entrepreneurship requires a certain set of skills. So it is also expected that that phase in your life, that process of teaching, learning, will also equip you with certain kinds of skills, and then you go out and become a useful member of the workforce or become a successful entrepreneur. And of course, at that stage, people are young, they are grown up, and as we understand, our country has the opportunity of this demographic dividend. So people at that age group are also supposed to become very productive members of the society. They are supposed to develop certain kinds of values, attitudes, mindsets. And obviously the higher education process is also expected to shape or mold your values into being a productive, a pro-social, a global citizen, so to say. Now the question is that how many of our higher educational institutions are actually delivering that? I would say that barring some of the best, let us say the IITs or IIMs or some of the new gen private universities in liberal arts, etc., none of the others, and I would include my own university as well. I won't claim today by any means that my university is churning out students who have a deep understanding of technology, who have all the skills required for becoming productive members of the workforce, and people who will become great citizens for the country, for the world, etc. And otherwise also. So I have been to one of the best business schools in the country, and if you ask me or any one of my classmates also, typically the answer, if you ask them the question that how much of what you learned in your course is helping you with your job, and barring the top or the best students, you'll be surprised that the answer may be 0% also. I mean, many people will see that the 2 years they spent in that IIM was just for lark. They made friends, they enjoyed they learned how to enjoy life and all that, but very little of that management which they learned in this college is of relevance to the job. And many people confess that they are learning quite a lot on their job rather than learning in the colleges, etc. So if that is the reality, if we are not able to successfully meet any of the outcomes, if even the best students confess that very little of what they learned on in the classes is actually applicable to what they do later on, then obviously we are living in some kind of a fiction, and we are not able to challenge that fiction. We are continuing to maintain that status quo, or at the best some incremental changes are happening. So the point which I'm trying to drive at is that this is the best opportunity to look at some very radical kind of transformation. And obviously I completely agree with you that the government has to take that lead in bringing those kind of radical reforms. Now you spoke about how do you deliver teaching learning, but even more fundamental question is, this is an operational question. If I'm not able to deliver it through internet, I may deliver it through television, broadcast, I may supplement some using India Post services, I may send you some workbooks. The operational issues can be resolved, but the very basic fundamental questions, what is the content that I'm delivering? What is the curriculum that I'm delivering? And if students confess they learn more on the job later on when they get into an industry or an organization, or when they become entrepreneurs, and very little of classroom learning matters to them, then why not change the way the curriculum is designed? Can we say that 80% of your curriculum will now be internships? Of course, physical internships will be difficult, but can I do virtual internships? I will learn only the very basic 20% concepts using either broadcast or internet or some kind of blended methodology, but 80% of my learning will be through internship. I am expected to develop skills of becoming a good workforce participant, or an entrepreneur. I'm expected to develop values, pro-social behavior, which is not happening. Can I substitute a part of my conventional teaching, syllabus-based teaching, into, let us say, watching a great movie, listening to TED Talks, reading biographies, looking at some very inspiring lectures, picking up lots of other ideas and perspectives in that process. Another bogey that we confront all the time is examination. And all of us know, of course, I know that all of you would have brilliant academic careers, but I know of many others also who might not have had great academic careers, but they have still done well in life. They have become good citizens, they have become productive citizens. So why bother about examination so much as an end of the year exam, on which everything depends? And we all know what kind of adverse consequences are. Why not substitute that system of exams with maybe assignments, maybe on the job learning, the feedback that your internship project gives, and a system of continuous evaluation, so to say. So I would suggest in my opening remarks that this is the time not just to worry too much about operational issues, but to look at a radical wholesale transformation. And COVID gives us the best opportunity to do these kind of things. Otherwise, we would have remained content with status quo, things as usual, but this is a great opportunity. And I'm sure, while I did not address anything related to school education, many of the points in a school education context also make sense, particularly about exams and so on and so forth. But I'd like to hear Dr. Rukmini, Dr. Saha, and others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jayesh. I think you raised some very interesting points, and you're right that the issues that relate to higher education and school education, in some sense, some of them at least, are not very different. So there is certainly a commonality there. I think one of the most interesting points that you made, and I think we can probably spend some time talking about that later, is the fact that why is it the students who haven't done well in academics in school, why is it that so many of them eventually end up doing well in life? I think there is something there that we are missing and we need to look at. With that, let me then invite Dr. Biswajit Saha, Director of Skills Education and Training with the Central Board of Secondary Education, to make his remarks. Dr. Saha.
Good morning, everybody. Mr. Jayesh Ranjan, Dr. Banerjee, Dr. Ramnath Subramaniam, and of course, our moderator and great personality.
Sorry, Dr. Saha, 1 minute. Can I request those who are not speaking to have their, or participants to have their mics muted, please? We're getting some disturbance. Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah. So I think Ranjan sir has rightly set the context with respect to examination and the future workforce, what way the state is aiming, and the way government and as a regulatory agency or as an individual, we must focus upon. So first of all, I completely agree with him. And secondly, the issue pertaining to examinations here, I think the proper synergy we need to establish between the school education and higher education. Because that university admission system, be it a premier institute like IIT, or be it any university, be BTech programs or any UG programs, mostly carried out based on the professional entrance exams and also with respect to the marks obtained in 10+2. Now come to the next level. Even after 10th, the polytechnic admissions, ITI admissions are also governed by, most of the states are following the marks-based enrollment. Now, as we are representing the school education, and mostly, if we look into the Indian education systems, if wherever the dropouts, but mostly enrolled in the schools. Now, basic dynamics of higher educations is actually leading the education in school. So that marks-based philosophy is we adapted or we adopt from the higher education. Now, it is parents and teachers to decide what way the learning happens in the schools and what way the children learn. So that dynamics, if we can really address upon, I think that would be a win-win situations for both of us. Now, with respect to pandemic is a temporary situations, of course, it is giving a altogether huge learning. And I believe whether it is CBSE or NGO or higher educational institute, everywhere, the thought process is saying, how can we engage learning in schools or in institute, or rather learning at home? And that engaging at home is a challenge for every institute, including the parents. So that engaging actually require to think beyond the curriculum. And curriculum, of course, it is certainly required, but I believe the pedagogy is important here. What way it is being delivered and addressed. And that too also to ensure the learning happens. And learning will happen only if children are satisfied with their requirement, and if that requirement suits their needs, then only they will engage themselves. And for that, one solutions could be that project-based learning approach, because that autonomy is very much there with the schools or even with the higher educational institutes. It is there. It is nowhere. Exams, whatever it is, continuous assessment or year-end assessment, that capability we need to ensure with respect to the children. And if they understand their potential, and we are rather have to help them to understand this potential only. Now, with respect to the technological enablement, I think many states, including union government, has taken a huge step in terms of coherence access. Coherence access here, if we look into this Diksha platform altogether, so content from CBSE, altogether from initially we launched Vidyadan program, and through that Vidyadan programs, we crowdsource the content from classes 6 to 10, and now from classes 1 to 12. So very soon, this all classroom content will be available in our Diksha portal from classes 1 to 12, including the assessment, practice sessions, lecture videos, then of course this mind map and other, even the concept where misconceptions. So all those dynamics of learnings are usually captured by us, and that will be available for the students, parents, teachers, all three stakeholders. It will be available, and through that we are trying to focus the asynchronous learning. Now, of course, as Dr. Amit has tried to put that agenda of digital divide and that assessed kind of connectivity issues and other. So there also the different initiatives are taken by the government to address these issues. So connecting last mile connectivity with this panchayat level is an agenda now. Now, so all these school in the neighborhood may get this Wi-Fi access very soon. I know this is the ground reality is something else, but even then, these initiatives has been taken so that community radio access, even CBSE has launched that Shiksha Bani podcast channel, through which anytime all this content of class 9 to 12 are readily available for different subjects. So according to the requirement of the child, they can log in and they can access those podcasts. Now we are preparing 1 to 8. So altogether, this coherence assess, even the government is planning to launch this 12 channel, dedicated channel for school education from classes 1 to 12, every channel, and that time scheduling, content scheduling, and including this content in different platforms. including that content student can look into through televisions, and assessment they can participate through Diksha. So this coherent assess is plan, and it is very soon it would be reality, and now also it is partial reality. And in fact, the various state governments are also very much encouraged to take this journey forward. As on date, over 90,000 content pages are available in Diksha. So huge. So the content is available. Now, how to encourage the child to access this? And even there is a possibility if there is any net connectivity issue. So we are ready to provide that offline content through hard disk or through pen drive to the school, and school then they can forward it to the every child at home. So for that, different delivery mechanisms are planned. I believe that way the present situations can be addressed, but for the future situations, we need to look into the learning outcomes and competency-based approach. Myself and Amit, we discussed few days back also, and in fact, new education policy is truly highlighting the requirement of competency-based education. And in these competency-based educations, the village school connect, the home school connect, and parents and culture connect is very important. And I think these pandemic situations, we can take the advantage how we can truly connect with our own soul and also connect with the family and neighborhood truly. Because education and the race for percentage, it is there, it will be there. But race for humanity is very much important. And that is possible only when the individual connected with arts, music, literature, because that gives the potential for brain. Otherwise, I believe we are putting the tremendous pressure to the students for that mark race, and ultimately their brains are dried up. And that's why so many mental cases are being lodged at different parts of the world, including the premier higher educational institutes, including the school. After the post-school results also, there are different kind of mishappening. And it is because of the preparations for the marks. So I believe for the humanity cause, parents, other stakeholders, civil society, and we regulator, let us come together to work for a new India where citizens are truly rooted with our culture, and then only education, of course it is there, it will be there. But what is the meaning if after getting 90% or more than 90%, one individual is not happy? So happiness quotient is more important at this stage. And I believe all together we can address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jitji. I think you made some very interesting points, and I'm delighted to hear CBSE talking about the fact that education is more than marks, and that education includes other things. It includes music, it includes art, it includes sports, it includes social and emotional well-being. So I think it's wonderful to hear CBSE also acknowledging this and talking about these things. I think the challenge sometimes lies, and perhaps we can come back to this in our discussion, in the fact that when governments create solutions, they create solutions from a one-size-fits-all perspective. And then differences between children or differences between students and diversity sometimes can get lost or be left unaddressed. So maybe we'll get a chance to come back to this. Let me now invite Dr. Ramnath Subramaniam, CEO of the Village Social Transformation Foundation, to make his opening remarks.
Yeah, good morning to all the panelists and also all the fellow people who are clued on to this webinar. I think before I start off, I thought I'll just give a 30-second brief about Village Transformation Foundation. Village Transformation Foundation is a Government of Maharashtra 100% owned company. It's a not-for-profit Section 8 company, in which a first of its kind in India, where all the corporates have come onto the platform, and the intention is to transform 1,000 villages in Maharashtra We are currently present in about 25 districts of Maharashtra and about 850 odd villages. The idea is inclusive growth, wherein we do a convergence program. We have our Gram Parivartak staying in the village, and they are the guys who are driving this entire change, along with support from the corporate partners. So we have Reliance, we have Mahindra, we have all the large corporates who are with us, about 15, 17 large corporates who are basically present in Mumbai. And also we have Hunt Foundation from Delhi as one of our partners, all the large banks. And together is this platform that's got created, which is for transforming villages in Maharashtra. As regards to education, from the government standpoint, I think even before the COVID-19 happened, the focus has always been shortage of teachers. I'm talking clearly from a rural perspective at this juncture because we are working in rural India, rural Maharashtra, so much to say. And the focus has always been very clearly on digitalization and trying to run digital classes for students. The intention is also try and see where teachers are not there, because there's a huge shortage of teachers across rural areas of India, and in Maharashtra also the same remains. However, there is a very clear focus from the government also in terms of support of the education department. In fact, the new minister also was coming, and the secretary education also very clearly focused on in terms of trying to increase digital education and trying to focus on teaching of digital to kids. We also have in Maharashtra a Marathi curriculum of Bal Bharti, which is a very effective curriculum program that happens, and they have also ventured into e-education, so much to say. So the digital platform can have the complete study material, which is typically otherwise available in the BMC schools in Mumbai, brought on to a digital platform. We've also, through our 1000 Village program, got corporate money institutionalized into this program, which could be upgrades of school, which could be paintings of school, providing infrastructure in schools, and also digital education, clean drinking water, etc. I would think that the COVID-19 would accelerate on what has happened this far. And Maharashtra has about 40,000 plus villages. So I guess the focus now of the government is also to try and see that in the scenario, in the COVID scenario, how it would still be some time before the kids start going to school. So how does this digitalization actually get implemented across the state, especially in some of the very, very remote villages where probably internet is also a challenge overall. But having said that, I think electricity and internet connection broadly in most parts of Maharashtra have probably found great inroads over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's very positive, so much to say that there isn't too many challenges overall in terms of the digital part of it. So I guess we were already moving towards that, this entire process of digitalization and module change. And as rightly indicated by one of the previous speakers about mental health support and all other activities related to that. So we have gone into a volunteering program in many of our villages where the fellows are there, and we ensure that even if the teacher doesn't turn up, our fellows or a volunteer from the village who's slightly well read would probably be, and this is typically the women in the village. So since you have this bunch of women who have come out now because of our program, we've seen them participating in a lot of village decisions as well. We have ensured that this leadership program is created, and even if the teachers don't turn up, it is these mothers of the kids who probably volunteer up to go and explain whatever comes on the platform in terms of trying to communicate to the kids. So this has been broadly what we have done as BSTF this far. A very small presence. So we're just in 1,000 villages of 40 odd thousand. But I think directionally, we're all moving towards this program and the support in terms of the digitalization and focus on child health, which has been very brilliantly done by Delhi as well, by the Delhi government. So I think that's a huge learning for us also overall in terms of how they have channelized the whole resources of the kids. And I think we are also trying to do something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Subramanian. That's very interesting indeed. I think what we'd be also interested to hear is what is the degree of government intervention in what you are doing, since we're looking at how government can support changes in education. and how you're managing to successfully navigate between government and the private sector in delivering those services. So perhaps maybe you can spend a minute talking about
Yeah,
that.
I can. So this program, how it is, as I told you, very different is that the chief minister, the deputy CM, basically have a quarterly review of how the program works. So the collectors, the deputy collectors, the CEOs, the deputy CEOs are the guys who are on ground, who are having the whole district machinery work towards saturation of schemes as well as implementation of various things in the program. Since they has continuously reviewed, I think there is huge focus on trying to do the best in the villages where the corporate partner is also present. So what we do is we only give them 10 lakh per village as the corporate partner's contribution. And the impact of this 10 lakh is typically that there is a 15x impact of the government convergence. So what we are trying to tell is that for a village where a Reliance or say an HDFC bank or ICICI Bank is with us, in that village, the CSR Partners Fund is only the gap funding of about 10 lakh rupees, which is basically for a RO plan for digital education, etc. But the roads, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Sadak Yojana, all these get saturated because the village, the Gram Parivartak is sitting there for the convergence to happen. So for every rupee that the corporate has broadly given us, the impact, net impact on the ground is, including the salary of the Parivartak, is about 10x. So that's the sort of saturation that the government is focused on in terms of the implementation, and that's why it is succeeding very clearly.
Excellent, thank you. Rukmini, may I now ask you to make some remarks before we start some question?
So wonderful to be on this panel. I think I'm the only one bona fide not from government, and so even Amit, you are a hybrid. And so I think it's a great opportunity. Many things now coming, even though my name is Pratham, I came last. So yeah, at one level, I feel like responding to some of the points that have been raised by the other panelists. But I thought I'd just go back to your original point about how, working with the government and what does that mean? Because I presume a lot of your listeners may be also people like me. And just to put it very crisply, I myself am from Bihar, and I remember being in a village and asking a group of mothers, pointing to the school, saying, "Ye kiska school hai?" And everybody in one voice said, "Sarkar ka school hai." So then I said, "Ki Sarkar kaun hai?" And they all started laughing at me, saying, "Sarkar hai, BDO hai, Sarkar, DM Sarkar hote hain, sab log Sarkar hote hain." So I said, "Sarkar ke paas paisa kahan se aata hai?" And they said, "Sarkar to Raj karta hai na, to jo Raj karta hai, uske paas paisa hota hai." And I think to me, that is the fundamental kind of connection between what the government does and what people do. And so until I tried very hard to convince that group of mothers that ye aapka school hai. And they said, "Nahi, ye hamara school nahi hai, ye sarkar ka school hai. Sarkar decide karti hai ki teacher kaun hoga. Sarkar decide karti hai ki bacche kya padhenge. Teacher nahi aata hai to sarkar hi kuch kare, kyunki humne to nahi rakha hai na teacher ko." So I went through great lengths. This was several years ago to try to explain public finance 101, simple tax. I said कि आप जब बस में चढ़ते हैं तो आप टिकट खरीदते हैं. They said नहीं खरीदते हैं. I said आप दुकान में जाते हैं तो जो चीजें खरीदते हैं. Anyway, long and the short of it was that until I think that people feel that this is mine, this is my government, I am the main funder, I think there will be this divide. And as Pratham, I would say that perhaps right from the beginning, there was this belief that we are part of the whole system. We are not outside or inside. It's my money as a citizen that actually funds all of this. And so partnering, there's no option but to work together, because otherwise I'm kind of blowing my money away somewhere else and doing something in parallel. So I think the philosophical orientation and the practical orientation to working with government is very important. That this is not an other, this is us, and we are two parts of the same coin. Having said that, of course, it's, being philosophical is all very well, but there are practical things that one must deal with. And over the years, of course, we worked with many governments. And I think that this idea, at least for us, has been very important, that you need to have your own laboratory, working very closely with communities and schools, hatching something that addresses a potential problem, because there's a whole government system that works. They have to be responsible end to end for many of the things in the education system, but there may be certain gaps, there may be certain places where a better solution or something innovative can come in. And that's the role that perhaps we have been trying to do. Whether it is the Asar report that sort of brought out the, basic, we need to pay attention to basic foundations of reading and math, or, what is the solution for that once children are in school and so on. I think that the COVID situation, I think, has been, if we, for a minute, don't worry about the health angle of what has been going on or the big economic hardship, I think across the board, it has been a time of huge learning for everyone. Whether it is at home and how we are coping with each other, whether it is in the community and so on. And I see a much bigger openness within governments for solutions. And I think that is a point that has to be leveraged, has to be sustained, has to be systematized as we go on. Because even with the governments who we work, we see that what they were doing in April has been different from what they're trying in May and different from what you're doing in July. So learning quickly from what is happening on the ground, trying to bring that back into the picture. I think that's a very accelerated learning that we are doing. And frankly, from people outside the government, being together rather than each individual player trying to do something with the government, I think coming together to say this whole fabric needs to have not just different threads, but it needs to be a full fabric that can actually address the issues is important. The couple of things from the COVID situation that I'd like to just point out. One is that I think across the board, whether you are an urban elite parent, doing Zoom classes with your children, or the kinds of people that we deal with a lot, rural, remote, uneducated, I think parents have come to the center of, they were always at the center of the child's life or of the child's schooling. But I think their responsibility for child's learning has somehow come to the center because there has been no other option. And I think that when schools open or in the plans that we make going ahead, we should capitalize on that. I think Dr. Shah spoke about engaging with families. And in our own experience, we work with right now we have a direct connect to about 12,000 villages. And we are largely connecting to villages in two ways. One is sending SMS because smartphones access is limited within families and across families and even within families, and following it up with a phone call. So somebody from Pratham that the family or the child knows calls once a week. And this two-way interaction has taught us a hell of a lot about how to engage parents and how to engage children. So even if it's a 167 character SMS, you can actually do quite a bit in it. And you can get good feedback if you phone and just talk to the parents. So simple things like we see when we send something slightly academic, what kind of response we get. I remember a couple of weeks ago, we sent one problem which said, aapke ghar mein pani kitna use hota hai on a daily basis? How much for cooking, how much for washing, and can you measure it in buckets? Our phone calls were, we got a tremendous number of phone calls saying, can I measure in a mug? Can I measure with a jug? Balti se kyun measure karne ki zarurat hai? Kal hamare ghar mein pani nahi aaya. So yesterday was not a good day to calculate. And these were calls coming from mothers, from siblings, from children. So I think how to engage, how to motivate, how to get people connected has been a big, big part. The other thing is we've been tracking when all this content lands on the ground. I worry a lot that pre-COVID, the education system in different ways, CBSE in one way, the rest of state boards in another way, we were moving to how do we really focus on learning rather than just completing of curriculum. I think Dr. Shah also spoke about this moving towards competency-based learning. And so that the curriculum or the content is just a piece in this journey towards children being able to do more. And with this COVID, I feel the scramble for e-content sometimes I think is, people are forgetting that this content has to land, children have to engage, they have to be motivated, and then that has to lead, even if today we can wait and give children the space and the time to connect, sooner or later all this has to lead to some kind of learning for which there is going to need to be interaction, whether it is from a distance or from close. And so we shouldn't forget that in learning, the human interaction is really important, whether it is children with children with teachers, the environment in which you are, the family, and so on. And so I think that as schools open, Clearly, the things that our panelists have talked about, we need better connectivity and so on. But I do think we need to think for the medium term about a continuum, something that happens at home every day, and that something may be dependent on whatever is the resources available. Something I think that the mohalla is a very important place. We are seeing, for example, Dr. Ramnath, there is a radio program which is was initiated by the Nagpur division in Maharashtra. We work with the government there a lot, and it's called Shale Baherchi Shala, which is a school outside school. And the government there felt that this is going to be a long haul. So the SMS campaign on the ground needs to be matched with some. So if the SMS is kind of what the army is doing, then there needs to be an air force that also reinforces this connection. And so there are, the radio program reinforces some of these messages. They are little messages. It's not online learning. It's just a couple of activities a day. And Gram Panchayats have been very, very useful in that, because Gram Panchayats, ICDS workers, teachers, to popularize ki aap isko sune. And loudspeakers are being used in many villages where maybe there are other difficulties of connectivity. So I think the second thing that this has taught us is that there are a lot of other people around who are willing to help if the task that has to be done is not complicated. We all know that as we move in the next few months, money is going to be a big constraint. There's going to be less money available at home. There's going to be less money available at community level. Certainly government is going to be strapped for cash. And so how to do more with less is going to be a big challenge. And for that, I think the fact that one thing India doesn't lack is people. And there are willing people if they are approached in the right way. So we are looking at migrant workers often as a problem. Coming from Bihar, I think the migrant workers are actually a huge resource. And while they are still at home and while they are still in the village, they have been exposed to many things in the world. How can you bring them in to contact with children and contact with, So I think the what, where, how, when of how school education happens may take very interesting turns. And we should allow local flexibility because local conditions are different. I think local decision making for education is important because you can then bring in where the panchayat is strong, you bring in the panchayat, where the self-help group is strong, you can bring them in, and allowing at the district level people to make these decisions, or even at the block level with a given goal. I'm not saying that you should move away from the goal, but with a given goal is certainly possible.
Thank you, Rukmini. I think very insightful comments. Let me start by since you're Pratham, let me start by giving you the Pratham question. And I'll pick up on something that you just said, which is local decision making with a given goal. I think when you look at it from government's point of view, governments look at things in terms of financial resources, human resources, deployment of these, no wastage or minimum wastage, and provision of services in an equitable manner to as many as is possible. Yeah. How do you reconcile that objective of government, which eventually leads to standardization and a one-size-fits-all kind of approach, with what you're talking about in terms of local decision-making with flexibility?
So I see this a lot from the work that we do with governments. I mean, for example, the dynamism of a district head, collector or DM or whoever you may call it, who has good ideas, has actually, the district is both small enough and big enough at the same time. And you can put in place whatever is the process to ensure that money is being well spent. But I don't understand why, given the goal, let's say you say a goal that by standard 5, child should be able to do this, or by standard 3, a child should be able to do this. Here's a budget. Here's somebody who's going to assess, some third party who's going to assess from time to time, and let the district, under the leadership of a responsible person, decide the path for the year. Why does a district have to be told you must spend 20% on this and 30% on this and 40% on this, and your teacher training has to happen in this way? I think that, we have 600 plus districts. Maybe you allow something like this, and more dynamic people can come and say, I want to do this, see how it goes. I feel like we are a huge laboratory for experimentation, responsible experimentation, goal-based experimentation, and allow that energy to take place. I see the same actually at a cluster level and block level. And when often I ask cluster level people, is problem ka solution kaise hoga? They will say, are you really asking me? You really want to know? Or because I'm always told what to do. so that I'll go ahead and do it. Now, every man may not be like this or every woman may not be like this, but I think there is plenty of dynamism. Even right now, we did a survey in about 1,000 villages in 5 states. And we find that 40% of teachers are doing something extra that they have not been told what to do. Either making content, reaching out to their children. So there are people who have ideas and energies. And I feel like the government people are actually the most experienced ones. You know, today, after 25 years in this sector, I have learned most from mid-level government people with whom we worked for a long time about how do you manage the scale, the cost, and the goal, and how do you do that, you know, to the best of your ability. So I just feel that this may be a time, and because COVID is going to require local decision making to allow this, and I'm not saying just leave it free. There are budgets. There has to be a way to, you know, process how it's spent. But simple goals, you know, when schools reopen, assure high attendance. Let the school, let the community decide how that is to be done.
Excellent. But before we actually come back to school and bring children into the school.
Sorry to interrupt, sir, but I would request you to wrap up the session since we have another panel in 5 minutes.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes. All right. In that case, I will. I think I've been looking at some of the questions that are being asked by the participants. I think one theme that comes through quite clearly is the concern around, well, 2 concerns. One around the digital divide, which is the fact that access to technology and the internet is not always available. And 2, social and emotional well-being of the children when they start to come back into the class. So let me address the second of those to Dr. Saha. Sujit ji, what is CBSE's view in about addressing the and emotional well-being of kids as they start to come back into the class?
Yes. So I think this is a primarily very important questions because many a times they are at stress. So only solution what we can suggest at this stage, or rather we are suggesting to our school leader through a different forum, that to connect with the parents at this stage. And every class teachers or teachers, maybe in a week or maybe in a 2 week, so they must connect with the parents and child, if not through digital media, maybe through phone. WhatsApp penetration is huge in India. So and through that also, I know there are several cases, and maybe last 2-3 months, we are also trying to connect with many students who are usually stayed in hostel in JNB or maybe in other government schools. So we came to know that many of their teachers are regularly connected with them through WhatsApp call. So I am surprised in the remote village, including the villages of this Maharashtra, villages of UP. So everywhere it is happening. So always just simply talking on digital divide, it is real issue. But for digital divide, we should not, education should not be stopped. And for that, that's why that alternative academic calendar, what NCERT has developed, is having a huge perspective, huge scope. So how from the kitchen garden, how from the daily routine one can learn. So this mechanism has been widely discussed and given a perspective what way the parent, school and student should be engaged during this point of time. So our focus is on learning and attendance, assessment, digital divide. So wherever technology reached, wherever that facility is there, let us take the advantage. But jahan pe pocha nahi hai, there we must address even by sending a messenger. I know many state has taken a step by sending a messenger to home or simply to distribute the textbook. So this is also methodology, so that at least something students are doing at home, and if some kind of group projects we can focus upon on any damn topic, anything, let the teacher decide. That autonomy is very much with the teacher. And teacher decide and distribute 5 or 10 topics. And even the week-wise celebrations could be there, something on anything. Maybe Independence Day is coming. Maybe some sports activities. So, or any topic they can celebrate, And before celebrations or maybe Swachhata or any sustainable goal, whatever being highlighted by UNICEF. So all those objectives can be primarily brought into the classroom and as a point of discussions. And students are powerful. Let us believe students are powerful, they can do anything. So with that trust, I think let us give the scope to continue the education. Thank you.
I think that's a very good point that you're making, which is that the way in which governments are now engaging with schools and students are not always digital.